Hi everyone, welcome back to AP Psychology with me, Miss Baines, your teacher, where you, my students, can take advantage of being able to pause and rewind me as I deliver you the latest content. So go ahead and grab those felt tip colored markers, get yourself a nice comfy space in which to work, and of course don't forget those ever important binder notes that go lockstep in order with this video called Unit 5, Video 2, Encoding. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so welcome back to our second video in our cognitive psychology unit, Unit 5. Our learning targets today are all about encoding, right? About how we encode our memories and our thoughts. Okay, so let's start with the first stage. Our process of memory, which is called encoding. Remember we talked about this in terms of like writing an extended essay. This is like actually creating your extended essay, right? So encoding is the process of getting the information into our brain. For example, we don't actually open up our brain and place like a picture of this cute little puppy here into our heads, right? No, we have mental representations that our cognitive system then understands. It's the same thing with letters and words. We don't actually have those little letters and those little words in our brains like refrigerator magnets, right? Of course not. We have a representation of them. So think of encoding like as if it were creating some sort of a code that our brain is going to use in order to understand which picture is which. So whether it's creating a mental image or creating a word inside of our head or a math problem, encoding is a process of getting those memories into our brain. So how do we encode, you ask? Well, there are two different ways. Some information, like for example, what you ate for lunch, is automatically processed. You don't even have to do anything for that information to get encoded into your brain. However, other information, like new information, for example, like maybe a new friend's or even a new crush's cell phone number, or the new name that you now have to pay attention to, or that you have to put some effort into remembering, right? So some things are automatic and some things require a little bit of effort. Let's talk about the automatic processing first. We have a ton of information that is processed without any effort by us, right? For example, we process space. When you are reading a book or a textbook, you automatically encode or process where, say, that picture or the graphic or the graph or the chart on that page was, okay? You can like think back without having to physically tell yourself, oh, that picture was on the top left corner. We can go back and look for where it is, right? We also remember things like time. Okay, we unintentionally know when events take place throughout the day and what sequence they happen in, and then the frequency or how often they occur. We don't really need to process or keep track of how often things happen to you in a particular day. So let's take a look at some specific examples of space where you were, say, I don't know, in an accident, where the accident occurred, right? You will never forget when that happens. You automatically process that. You don't have to physically like put that information in there and rehearse it. Oh, this is where I had an accident. This is where I had an accident. No. Again, the time maybe when you woke up this morning, or what point at a show when something really crazy happened. Like say you were watching, I don't know, Grey's Anatomy, right? Like that guy that jumped out of a plane without a parachute ended up living until like 5 hours later when he realized every bone in his body was broken. Something crazy like that happened. Yeah, it's about, I don't know, halfway through the show. Then there's frequency. Say how many slices of pizza you had for dinner, or how many speeding tickets you received in a particular year. The main point is that for automatic processing, you really don't have to rehearse that information or encode it, okay? It just happens naturally. For example, if you're trying to remember what you had for lunch, you don't repeat to yourself, I am sitting at the table, I am in the cafeteria, it is 12 p.m., I am having a cheeseburger with french fries. No. That would be sort of weird, right? You would be an oddball. So automatic processing is happening without us really trying. It does not require any effort at all. It's right. So the opposite, effortful processing, however, is new information. Remember this word, novel, right? Not novel, the book, but novel. It means new. Novel information or new information that we have to commit to memory, which requires some kind of an effort. So like when you're learning a new concept, okay? When you're learning new vocabulary words, or when you're learning a new historical event or about a war, you have to put some effort into remembering those things, all that stuff. And when you do, you put some effortful processing into remembering the things. And then you can recall it later and remember it better. Our memory is more durable and more accessible. It's that idea that practice makes perfect, right? The more you practice the new memory, the more you are going to remember it. Okay? So effortful processing comes to you and it lasts longer. So encoding isn't always perfect though. Sometimes it doesn't go well. What are some of the memory effects when encoding doesn't go well? One is called the next in line effect. This effect is that when you recall or your memory is better. Your memory is better for what other people say, but poor for a person just before you in line. Okay, we're going to give some examples of that in a second, but get that definition down. So when your recall is better for what other people say, but poorer for a person just before you in line. The next one is the spacing effect. Okay, the spacing effect is when we retain information better when our rehearsal is distributed over time. And then finally, the serial positioning effect, right? That is when your recall is better for the first and last items, but poor for the middle items on lists, okay? So let's go back to next to line effect. Let's talk about this again. What are some examples? Okay. Well, when you're in class and you're about to have to read out loud and you know what section you're going to have to read aloud, you are more worried about what you're going to read and that you're not paying attention to the people around you, and therefore you're not likely to really remember what somebody who is going before you or after you is reading, right? Because if you're just focusing on what you have to read, you really can't focus on the things that are happening immediately before you or after you. Okay, next up is spacing events. Okay, so spacing events studies show that many studies show that if you study a little bit each night, like you put in an effort each and every night, a little bit to study, you will remember a lot of the information better. But then if you just cram the night before or the week before a big test like the AP exam, is something you should all take note of. You should all do your tests, especially your semester exam, the AP exam at the end of our year, Unit 9, April 2nd, right? You should be studying and looking back on things a little bit each night. That's why I added a few questions, one per unit, on our last unit test. Right? Makes sense? So that you're remembering it better over time. All the things that we've gone over and remind you of the things that you need to review. This is called the spacing effect. And next up is serial positioning effect. Let's think about U.S. presidents, for example. How many can you name? Who comes to mind? Okay, probably the first few U.S. presidents, maybe the last few. Right, the most recent, and then probably a couple of outliers there in the middle. Maybe Lincoln, JFK, FDR. But really, you're remembering those first few and the last few. The middle are kind of like murky. I don't really know, especially where they come in line with the other ones, right? There's a serial positioning effect of not knowing the all big group in between. We're going to get where we're going to look at that a little bit closer later on. We are also going to do visual encoding with mental pictures or images. These are really powerful when we're trying to use effortful processing, especially when we combine when we combine words with the visuals, okay? So showing, say, the adverse effects of sun tanning or smoking with a picture might be more powerful than just talking about it or using words alone in an ad campaign, right? They all use pictures. So showing you this picture on the left here, you looking at it can probably determine which of these two twins smokes, right? Just by looking at it, we know that smoking causes an increased metabolism, which means you might weigh less, but severely damages your skin as well. So this twin probably smokes, right? The one on the right. This is why when you're trying to remember things, it's always good to create pictures in your mind to coincide with whatever it is you're trying to learn. So on Quizlet, your vocab words, sometimes they create them with pictures because they're going to help you remember them better, okay? So active versus passive processing, okay? We always talk about active versus passive studying. This is the idea here. This is what they're talking about. Studying properly requires that you actively do something so that you're more likely to remember it. It's better than when you just passively learn something, right? So active processing is when you're visualizing things, when you're actively trying to put things into your memory. You're actually doing something that involves a process. So for example, you might write out and then rewrite your notes, or you might create flashcards based on your notes, or you might quiz yourself. That's all active studying. Whereas passive is just going to try to memorize all the things that you wrote down the first time, maybe by flipping through once or twice. Right, taking a quick look at your notes and looking over them before the test or the night before, maybe for 5-10 minutes. It's going to be the things that you really only need to be remembered right now, right? Okay, so active equals effortful processing. That is trying to connect the new stuff to what is already in your brain. By using your previous experiences, and you're trying to make note of what is already there. And passive processing is just like sitting and observing, or not really like even being there, right? You're just kind of doing it halfway. Maybe the TV is even on, etc. So with passive, you're just going to kind of be like waiting for it to just jump into your brain kind of through, I don't know, maybe osmosis or something, okay? So there's a bunch of different ways that we remember things, and one of the best ways for us to remember things is by use of mnemonic devices, or what we call mnemonics. Mnemonics use mainly imagery in order for us to remember things, okay? Imagery is at the heart of many memory aids, okay? So there are a few that we're going to talk about. The first one we're going to talk about is the method of loci. So the method of loci involves imagining moving through a familiar series of locations with the items that you want to remember. So for example, if you have a list of groceries to pick up, but they aren't written down on a piece of paper, you might try to remember them by putting each one of those items into a different room in your home and then making up a little story visually to go each room. As you go through each room, you pick up that item and then you remember the story that you told yourself when you get to the grocery store, and you're able to remember each and every item, right? You just go back through your brain, you look through your mind, and you visually go through each of those rooms in your house. Okay, that's the method of loci. The next method is called the peg word. Okay, peg word, this is the idea that we memorize a jingle, okay, and then we associate that jingle with a list that we're trying to remember. So maybe you guys have heard of I after E, except after C, or when it's an A, as a neighbor away. However, it's better if you can visualize the items. So for example, for a jingle is 1 is fun and 2 is shoe, 3 is tree and 4 is door. Something like that, and your list is, I don't know, hamburger buns, lettuce, banana, cheese, tomatoes. We would match those things up. 1 is fun, bun, 2 is shoe, banana, boats, 3 is tree, 2 E's and tree, cheese, 2 E's, tree, 4 is door. So, okay, let us eat. I don't know. Okay, you're making up ridiculous connections, but memorable ones, and you can make different lists with your little rhymey song and your own memory. Another one is called the link method. Okay? The link method involves forming a mental image of items to be remembered in a way that links them together. So if you know that you need a list of groceries, say, I don't know, popcorn, toothpaste, and hamburger buns, tomatoes and cheese and lettuce. I would envision maybe my little sister Lila, when she was 5, putting a dot of that glitter toothpaste on every surface between her room and the downstairs, right? I would picture her in that kitchen cooking microwave popcorn, and right under the microwave is our bread drawer, and that's where we keep the buns and other bread. And then I would remember all the stuff that goes on a burger anyway, so I wouldn't even have to make up a story for that part. Right? That's the story for me. It links to 2 things together at first, and then the link method helps you to link those things together with a story that you can remember. So you're linking together the list, and that's why it's called the link method. You're kind of linking each thing together. Another way to remember things is by chunking, okay? We've already talked about chunking in our first video, but chunking is organizing things in either familiar units or more manageable units, okay? So if you try to remember this number on the right, okay, 177614921812191, there is no way that you could remember that number, right? Now, if you close your eyes and try to remember it, so here, take a look. Can you remember them? Probably not, right? Even if you close your eyes right now and you try to remember your very, very hardest, you're not going to get half of them right. However, if you chunk them, you're going to recall them better. So the first is 1776, 1776, 1492, 1812, 1941. Hopefully you recognize these as some pretty major events in American history, right? Now you can remember all of these numbers because all you really have to do is chunk them as historical events. We tend to do that one pretty naturally, right? I've always been told to try to remember things like a phone number, and it makes things a little bit easier. I've always been told to try to remember things like a phone number, and it makes things a little bit easier for you. You guys don't really need to know how to do that because you have apps to do that for you. It might be something different now, like learning how to spell a word. But that's the idea of chunking. Us putting things into familiar or more manageable units or chunks. Acronyms are another great way to chunk information, okay? So for example, acronyms like HOMES. HOMES we can use to remember the Great Lakes, right? Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior, HOMES. PEMDAS, right? For the order of operations in math. Parentheses, exponent, multiply, divide, add, subtract. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. At least that's what we used to hear when they taught it to us. Now I think it's something like penguins eat donuts after sunset, so that kids can remember those orders of operations. And then there's Roy G. Biv, our primary colors. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, okay? So that's it. That's all for today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.